I do not have time for tears. Rhaena Targaryen, after hearing of the death of her husband Aegon in the battle beneath the God's Eye, Fire and Blood, the Sons of the Dragon. Princess Rhaenys Targaryen is remembered as the queen who never was. We can sit here and debate all day as to if being passed over was right or wrong. I tend to think it's a mix of both, as the reality of the issue is much more complex than it first seems. But the truth of the matter is, Rhaenys Targaryen was not the first and not the last almost queen of Westeros. While her case is much more prominent and debated, there are others who had just as big of an impact on history during their own era. But these lost queens of House Targaryen never were, each for very different reasons, and each resulting in a series of different outcomes. Arguably the most prominent of these cases is Princess Rhaenys Targaryen, who was the only child and then heir of Prince Aemon. When her father died, she was 17 and was passed over in favour of King Jaehaerys' second son, Balon the Brave, with all of this accumulating in the Great Council of 101 AC and eventually the Dance of the Dragons. In this video, you will see a distinct difference in how claims of women to the throne are handled pre and post Great Council of 101 AC and Dance of the Dragons, with the claims of women taken much more seriously before it, with a handful of possible claimants after being dismissed easily without much outcry. The first of our queens who never were we are going to be discussing is Rhaena Targaryen, the eldest child of King Aenys Targaryen and Alyssa Velaryon, the elder sister of King Jaehaerys. Now, first and foremost, Rhaena is a queen, technically twice over, and she had that title most of her adult life. The key difference is this title comes from her marriages and not via her own claim to the throne. She was never a ruling queen in her own right. Rhaena was born in 23 AC on Dragonstone to the then Prince Aenys Targaryen and his wife Alyssa Velaryon. She was the first grandchild of Aegon the Conqueror and named after her late grandmother, Rhaenys Targaryen. It was at her birth her place in the line of succession would be debated for the first time. Many wondered if her uncle Prince Maegor would fall behind her in the line of succession, as she was the eldest and at the time only child of Aenys, the heir to the throne. It seemed this question was never directly answered. If it had been addressed by the Conqueror at the time and set into law, it would have ended many succession disputes for years to come, and would have likely prevented events such as the Dance of the Dragons from ever happening. Maegor's mother, Queen Visenya Targaryen, did propose a betrothal between her son and Rhaena in order to settle the succession issue. However, both Rhaena's parents and the High Septon protested this match. At the age of 9, Rhaena was presented with a dragon hatchling. She bonded instantly with it, and she named the dragon Dreamfire. At the age of 12, she flew upon her dragon for the first time, and shortly thereafter, Rhaena became friends with her cousin, Larissa Velaryon. The two girls were inseparable, until Larissa was suddenly sent back to Driftmark to marry the second son of the Evenstar of Tarth. Rhaena soon befriended Samantha Stokeworth, the daughter of Lord Alan Stokeworth, the Hand of the King. Rhaena would then go on to have a number of favourites over her life, all of whom she would shower with affection and attention to such extent it was cause for whispering at court that she perhaps preferred the company of women over men. Rhaena's first younger brother, Aegon, was born in 26 AC. She and Aegon were apparently close during their childhood, and Rhaena would sometimes take him flying with her upon Dreamfire. Rhaena was known to dote on her siblings, and it was said that she placed the dragon eggs in the cradles of her brother and sister, Jaehaerys and Alysanne, from which the dragons Vermithor and Silverwing would hatch. In 37 AC, Rhaena's father, Aenys, ascended to the Iron Throne at the death of Aegon the Conqueror. Rhaena had numerous suitors, being the eldest daughter of the king, but she gave no encouragement to any of them, preferring to spend time with her siblings, her cats and her dogs. When Rhaena turned 16, she declared herself free to fly where she wanted. Dreamfire was seen in Harrenhal, Tarth, Runestone and Goldtown. It was rumoured, although never proven, that one of these flights, Rhaena had given her maidenhead to a lowborn person. Some have suggested that due to these rumours, King Aenys wished for Rhaena to marry as soon as possible. In 41 AC, when Rhaena was 18 years old, she was betrothed to her younger brother, Prince Aegon, 15. According to Archmaester Gildain, Rhaena and Aegon had likely expected to be wed to one another ever since they were young, and were fond of each other, so neither objected. Doing this meant Aenys could avoid directly answering the question of succession, for the time being at least. While Aegon was widely seen as his father's heir, there were still some who saw his marriage as a way of merging the claims of both Rhaena and Aegon. The Faith of the Seven did not accept the incestuous match. While they had ignored the marriage of Aegon the Conqueror and his sisters, they would not do the same for their grandchildren. This was compounded by the fact that in 39 AC, Prince Maegor had taken a second wife, Alis Harroway, and had thus been exiled for it to Pentos. This pushback by the High Septon was shared by the faithful throughout the Seven Kingdoms. Despite this reaction, Rhaena and Aegon were wed in the Sept of Remembrance in King's Landing. After the ceremony, King Aenys decided to send Aegon and Rhaena on a royal progress, remembering the cheers of his own when he ascended to the throne. Rhaena had asked her father's leave to bring her dragon, but Aenys had forbidden it, fearing that Aegon, who had not yet claimed a dragon of his own, might be considered unmanly by the lords and commons if they saw his wife on dragonback, but him on a horse. This idea of Aegon not possessing a dragon, yet his sister wife did, alludes to the fact that the sheer possession of a dragon for many speaks to the right of a Targaryen to be king. The relationship between House Targaryen and the Faith continued to worsen, with the High Septon calling Aenys King Abomination, declaring him a pretender and a tyrant with no right to rule the Seven Kingdoms. The pious of the realm heeded his words, starting an uprising against the Iron Throne. Rhaena and Aegon were forced to abandon their royal progress and take shelter in Crakehall. By the start of 42 AC, the castle was besieged by poorfellows. Upon learning of the attack on his children, King Aenys collapsed and died 3 days later on Dragonstone. And this is the moment the succession during this early period of Targaryen history starts to get messy. I've once again teamed up with Flexispot, who this time have sent me the Lotus XC6 swivel-based reclining chair. It's perfect for my entertainment room, with 360-degree rotation and an easy access built-in footrest, and a rocking function that my dog seems to enjoy greatly. Over the last 10 years, I've had 5 reclining chairs, most of them brought from eBay, with them breaking within a few months of use. Screws would start to strip, wood snap, leather crack. But that's certainly not the case with the Flexispot Lotus XC6. It's very well built and hardly any assembly was required. Only 4 screws were needed. It mostly just slides together. It's the widest recliner I've ever had, which means I can easily fit myself and my overly attached dog on the chair with no problem. Long-time viewers will know I've worked with Flexispot before with their motorized standing desks and the XL3 recliner with massager. And I can say from having these products for a long time now, they are fantastic. They are built to last. Flexispot are having a Black Friday sale with 10% off site-wide, with some products up to 90% off, with 80 customers getting their order for free across a 5-day event starting on the 28th. Check out the links below for more information about the Black Friday sale and the Lotus XC6. When Rhaena was born, the question as to if she now replaced Maegor in the line of succession was never addressed. When Aegon was born and later made Prince of Dragonstone, the question of Rhaena's place still lingered on. Rather than directly address the issue, her marriage to Aegon meant that her own claim to the throne could be pushed aside somewhat. Something highlighted by the fact that her possession of a dragon directly made her husband and brother, the heir, look weak in comparison to herself. House Targaryen, not just Aenys and Aegon the Conqueror, had danced around the issue and never codified or set out any laws that laid out how succession to the Iron Throne would work. It was simply being based on tradition and precedent of hundreds of years of history. But there was one person who was willing to ask this question: Dowager Queen Visenya Targaryen, whom from the moment Rhaena was born wanted to address the succession issue with a marriage between Maegor and Rhaena. What Visenya probably saw was that with no hard law of succession, the reality is anyone with the blood of House Targaryen could take the throne as long as they possessed the will and power to do so. Upon the death of King Aenys, Visenya flew to Pentos to retrieve Aenys' brother and her son, Maegor, from exile. When they reached Dragonstone, Maegor claimed the throne for his own, ignoring the claims of Rhaena's husband and Aenys' eldest son, Aegon. When the Faith who were besieging Crakehall finally departed to march on King's Landing, Rhaena and Aegon took their refuge at Casterly Rock, where Lord Lyman Lannister protected them by extending guest rights. There, Rhaena discovered that she was pregnant. Her twin daughters, Princess Aerea and Rhaella were born at Casterly Rock the following year, in 43 AC. After the birth of the twins, the High Septon proclaimed them to be abominations, born of lust and incest, cursed by gods. According to the maester serving at Casterly Rock at this time, Rhaena is said to have begged Aegon to flee with her across the narrow sea, out of the reach of Maegor, stating that she would be willing to give her life for Aegon, but she was unwilling to risk the lives of their children. Aegon refused, as he was determined to claim his birthright. In late 43 AC, Rhaena and Aegon took advantage of Maegor's half-year absence from the capital while he was dealing with the Faith Uprising. They managed to successfully infiltrate the Red Keep. However, they dared not seize the Iron Throne itself, knowing they lacked the strength to hold it. Instead, they had come for Rhaena's Dreamfire and for a dragon for Aegon. When Rhaena and Aegon left King's Landing, they did so flying side by side, Rhaena on her Dreamfire and Aegon on their late father's dragon, Quicksilver. Rhaena and Aegon returned to the Westerlands to assemble an army which gathered at Pink Maiden Castle. However, when Aegon marched to war against Maegor, Rhaena did not accompany him, staying at Pink Maiden with their daughters. Some speculated that this choice by Aegon may have been because he saw one of his twin daughters as his own heir and thus needed them to be protected and away from danger, with Rhaena also staying so she could push their claims to the throne should Aegon be killed. In the battle beneath the God's Eye, Aegon and Quicksilver were killed by Maegor and Balerion, and Aegon's armies were slaughtered. My brother Aegon died at the hands of our uncle in the battle beneath the God's Eye. His wife, my sister Rhaena, was not with him at battle, but she died that day as well. Jaehaerys the First Targaryen at Rhaena's funeral pyre. Fire and Blood, Jaehaerys and Alysanne, their triumphs and tragedies. Rhaena fled to Lannisport, and from there, Fair Isle, where she was given sanctuary in Fair Castle by Lord Mark Farman, whose family had pledged to Aegon's cause. Aegon's eldest daughter, Aerea, could now claim to be the rightful queen of the Seven Kingdoms. But as she and her twin Rhaella were barely a year old, Rhaena worked quickly to protect them from Maegor's wrath. She disguised the girls and sent them away with allies, who placed them in foster families, who had no idea of their true identities. This ensured that Rhaena was unaware of where her daughters had been hidden, so she could not reveal their whereabouts under torture. However, though Rhaena could also disguise herself, it was impossible to hide her dragon Dreamfire. Therefore, she remained on Fair Isle, only wondering how long it would be before Maegor sent for her. It is said that on Fair Isle, Rhaena grew more than fond of Lord Mark Farman's second son, Andro. However, according to Fairmaster's maester, it was Andro's sister Alyssa who was Rhaena's true love. In 47 AC, King Maegor was dealing with the issue of his lack of heirs, despite already marrying 3 women. Lord Daemon Velaryon, Rhaena's uncle and member of Maegor's small council, advised Maegor to wed Rhaena to unite their claims and prevent new rebellions, and to gain her as a hostage against any potential schemes of Dowager Queen Alyssa. Later that year, Maegor did summon Rhaena to King's Landing, and she dared not defy him. Maegor married Rhaena in a triple ceremony, alongside Eleanor Costaigne and Jane Westerling. As the 3 women were all widows of men Maegor had killed, they became known as the Black Brides. Although many believed that Rhaena would give a show of defiance at the wedding, Maegor's Mistress of Whisperers, Queen Daena, revealed she had found Aerea and Rhaella, and ensured Rhaena's cooperation. But Rhaena spoke her vows icily, and she would later claim that during the wedding night, she attempted to kill Maegor with a dagger hidden beneath her pillow. Immediately following the wedding, Maegor declared Rhaena's eldest daughter Aerea as his heir until he had sons of his own, while disinheriting Rhaena's younger brother Jaehaerys in the same decree. At this time, being the eldest living son of Aenys, and with Maegor having no heirs, many were starting to see Jaehaerys as a legitimate heir and king. Rhaena's younger daughter Rhaella was sent to Oldtown to be trained as a scepter. Rhaena herself remained at the Red Keep until 48 AC, where she learned that Jaehaerys had announced his claim to the throne. She escaped King's Landing in the night on Dreamfire to join Jaehaerys' cause at Storm's End. Rhaena also took her daughter Aerea and the Valyrian steel sword, Blackfire, which she stole from Maegor while he slept. Enraged, Maegor sent riders to Oldtown, commanding Lord Hightower to behead Rhaella as punishment for Rhaena's betrayal. But Lord Hightower refused, and instead imprisoned the messenger. Following Maegor's death, Rhaena and her siblings Jaehaerys and Alysanne flew on their dragons to King's Landing to claim the throne for Jaehaerys. Aegon the Dragon and his sisters conquered the 7 kingdoms, 6 of them at least, but it was Jaehaerys the Conciliator who truly made them one. The writings of Umbert, Fire and Blood, Prince into King. Discussions arose as who had the better claim to the Iron Throne. There were some suggestions that Rhaena's claim as the firstborn child of King Aenys and Queen Alyssa Velaryon was the strongest. Her gender argued against her, and Rhaena herself had come to loathe King's Landing and its court, and is said to have had no desire for it. The claims of her daughters were also argued for, as well as being the daughters of Aegon the Uncrowned. Would their claims supersede Jaehaerys? If Maegor was to be considered a usurper, the true king would have been Rhaena's husband Aegon, who had claimed the throne before Jaehaerys had. As such, some suggested the throne should pass on to one of his daughters by Rhaena, Aerea or Rhaella. The young girls did not have much support, however, and Rhaena herself agreed the crown should go to Jaehaerys instead. But it was agreed that until a child was born to Jaehaerys, that Rhaena's daughter Aerea would be his heir. But while it would seem that despite some calls for Rhaena to take the throne, she dismissed them. But there may be another side to this story the history books do not tell us. During the later parts of her life, Rhaena suffered much tragedy, which in itself may have changed her attitude towards her own claim to the throne. Rhaegar Baratheon was one of Jaehaerys' earliest and biggest supporters. Without him, it would have taken much longer to sap away the supporters of Maegor. Rhaegar would serve as Hand of the King and Protector of the Realm during Jaehaerys' minority. Although Rhaena honoured Lord Baratheon grudgingly for his support of Jaehaerys against Maegor, she could not forgive nor forget his inaction when her husband Aegon had fought Maegor. When her mother married Lord Rhaegar later that same year, Rhaena did not attend the wedding and remained on Fair Isle. Men in the Westerlands, the Reach and parts of the Riverlands began referring to Rhaena as Queen in the West, owing to the fact she was a queen, if not to Aegon, but to Maegor. But in time, some began to sense the divide in House Targaryen and began to see the title more literally. It is true, as time passed, Rhaena began to resent the fact her claim to the throne and that of her daughters had been dismissed in favour of Jaehaerys, to whom she began to refer to as my baby brother. In addition, Rhaena begrudged her mother for promoting Jaehaerys' claim over her own. It appears that bitterness towards her right to the throne only grew as she got older. In 54 AC, following Andro-Farman's suicide after trying to poison Rhaena's ladies-in-waiting, and the deaths of her friends and companions, Rhaena plunged into a deep depression and grew enraged, even the mention of her husband's name. Queen Alysanne Targaryen did come to visit Dragonstone in an attempt to comfort her sister, but Rhaena did not welcome her presence. She attempted to send Alysanne away 3 times, screaming at her in front of half the castle. Alysanne refused to leave. So Rhaena locked herself in her room, and Alysanne restored order to Dragonstone. She also attempted to comfort Aerea, but the girl was also angry and resentful. Aerea eventually admitted that she felt rejected by her mother and jealous of Alysanne's daughter, and finally begged to be taken back to King's Landing with Alysanne. Alysanne did bring this request to Rhaena, who refused coldly, stating that she had nothing, and Alysanne had everything, but would not take Rhaena's daughter as well. She concluded that, "You have my throne, content yourself with that." Rhaena then called Aerea to her chambers, whereby they argued loudly about the matter. Eventually, when Alysanne left the island, she left alone. So it very much seems that Rhaena grew to believe that the throne was hers by right, and became very bitter towards the matter. Rhaena Targaryen did have a valid claim to the Iron Throne, but how strong of a claim it really is depends on the method of succession you subscribe to. As Rhaegar Baratheon states, Westeros is not Dawn, where women inherit easily. The issue Rhaena would have is both Jaehaerys and her daughter Aerea technically had stronger claims to the throne than her. Jaehaerys was rightful king under male primogeniture, as he was the last living Targaryen male descendant of Aenys. In this case, succession would be the following: Jaehaerys, Aerea, her twin sister Rhaella, Rhaena, Alysanne. In this scenario, Rhaena's claim itself was below that of her daughter, as their claim comes from their father, not their mother. Aerea was the rightful queen under male preference primogeniture, as her father was Jaehaerys' older brother, and would have been king had Maegor not usurped him. So in this case, succession would go Aerea, Rhaella, Jaehaerys, Rhaena, Alysanne. Aerea was also the rightful queen under Maegor's decree and disinheritance of Jaehaerys, as Maegor had expressly disinherited him and named Aerea his heir. The only way Rhaena could have been rightfully queen is under absolute primogeniture, which at the time was only practiced under Dornish law. And then of course you have the age-old debate whether a niece comes before an uncle, with this matter very much open to interpretation. Basically, Rhaena did have a legitimate case to press her claim, or even her daughter's, but she didn't want to press it at the time, as she knew she'd gain no support for a woman claiming the throne for a little girl against a man. It wasn't going to convince many lords, whose own succession to their lordship could come under question in this scenario. Under the method of succession most often used in Westeros, Jaehaerys was the rightful king. But what is also important to remember is Rhaena's husband Aegon had been killed by her uncle Maegor, and he was never technically crowned, which is also another sticking point for a lot of people. There is a lot of speculation and suggestion around Rhaena that she may have been a lesbian, or at the very least bisexual. Her preference for female favourites, and the language used to describe them, suggests she was more interested in women, but some fans do believe, given some of the other rumours about her and the existence of her children with Aegon, she possibly could have been bisexual as well. Putting that aside, at the very least, Rhaena and Aegon were close siblings, and after all he was the father of her daughters. She spent years in hiding and running from Maegor after Aegon's death. Then she was forced to marry Maegor, a man she despised, and thus also forced to sleep with him, which when you factor in her possible sexuality, would have compounded this trauma even harder. She and the realm had been devastated by the end of Maegor's rule, and she likely wanted it just to be all over with. Rhaena had no interest in pressing her claim or her daughter's claim against Jaehaerys, likely because of this. Aerea was named Jaehaerys' heir, which was good enough for her, and she went back to Fair Isle to be with Alyssa Farman. After all her suffering, can you really blame Rhaena for not wishing to push her claim, or that of her daughter, instead of running away to a remote island which was effectively her happy place? Thus, after many years and distance from these events, it does start to make sense why over time she would reassess her own thoughts and feelings over her claim to the throne, whether her claim was legitimate or not. So was Rhaena a queen who never was? Yes. Was Aerea a queen who never was? Yes. But it really depends on who you ask and what your position is on Westerosi succession. A ruler needs a good head and a true heart. A cock is not essential. If your grace truly believes that women lack the wit to rule, plainly, you have no further need of me. Alysanne to her husband, Jaehaerys I Targaryen, shortly before the second quarrel. Fire and blood, heirs of the dragon, a question of succession. Because here is the huge issue with House Targaryen succession methods. There was no formal law that stated how it worked, and how the line of succession was decided. When you look at the pre-conquest family tree of House Targaryen, it very much seems that since the Doom, the family had been using male primogeniture in deciding the next Lord of Dragonstone. And given the sheer number of sibling marriages happening, they never really had to codify their succession. It appears Rhaena is the first time something like this came up, where there was a question as if Rhaena would have a better claim than the eldest living son. Then when you throw Maegor's existence into the mix as well, it only complicates issues further. As the ruling family, the kings of Westeros, it's frankly irresponsible for them to bury their heads in the sand like this. Aegon the Conqueror or Aenys should have set out the laws of succession the moment the issue arose with Rhaena and Maegor. By not doing that, allowed for kings just to handle succession how they wanted, and a different king and a different family members will have different motivations. It's clear Jaehaerys wanted to use the male primogeniture, that's why he chose Balon the Brave over Rhaenys as heir. It seems that the Great Council of 101 voted in favour of the male primogeniture candidate because it was what a majority of the houses in Westeros were using. It's in their best interest to vote for the method which grants them their own power, or risk members of their own family starting a succession dispute against the current lord. But here's what's even more stupid. The Great Council was meant to set a precedent for succession, but precedent is not law. During the Dance of the Dragons, the Greens base Aegon II's claim to the throne on that precedent of the Great Council, while the Blacks base theirs on the fact that Rhaenyra is the named heir of her father, King Viserys, and at the end of the day, the king's word is the king's word. By not codifying laws, it allowed Viserys to break with tradition and name his daughter heir over his son. And that's the thing when it comes to the idea of Rhaena Targaryen being rightful heir. If you as a reader believe a certain method of succession is the correct one, you will interpret who is heir differently. And in the case of Rhaena, while precedent doesn't favour her, how can you stop her pushing her claim when there's no laws defining rightful succession? The reason some fans claim that the Greens won the Dance of the Dragons on an ideological level is the method of succession they favour, male primogeniture, is effectively what is used for the rest of the Targaryen era of Westeros, bar a few unique exceptions, such as the Great Council of 233 AC. King Aegon III's claim to the throne technically comes via Daemon and not his mother Rhaenyra, or at least that's how some interpret it. It seems that not just House Targaryen, but the Lords of Westeros learned that sticking to one method of succession everyone agrees to will avoid events such as the Dance of the Dragon, where there's been questions of another woman inheriting the throne over a male cousin or brother, such as in the cases of Daena Targaryen, Daena the Defiant, and Aelora Targaryen. They're very much dismissed quickly in favour of male primogeniture. But what's ironic, there was still no codified laws, which is what allowed the likes of Daemon Blackfyre to make his own claim to the throne and start the Blackfyre rebellions. There is one clear and fast rule that matters when it comes to succession. Like Maegor the Cruel shows us, the throne belongs to the man with the strength to take it. Maegor was way down the line in succession by the time he took the throne. He was the conqueror's son, yes, but you had Aegon, Viserys, Jaehaerys, likely Rhaena and Alysanne, in front of him. He took the throne by force. He held the throne by force and lost the throne when his supporters saw him lose grip on power. Robert Baratheon wasn't technically the rightful king after the death of Aenys and Rhaegar, but he took the throne because he had the power to do so, and his supporters believed in his ability to hold that power. Succession is a complex issue when it comes to House Targaryen. There was no laws, yet hundreds of years of precedent. Yet the Dance of the Dragons shows us what is the worth of precedence against the will of a king naming his own heir. To some, women like Rhaena, Aerea, Rhaenys, Rhaenyra, Daena, and Aelora are all women who had their birthright stolen from them, while to others it's clear their brothers or cousins were in fact the rightful kings. And that's the beauty of George R.R. Martin's world building. It's full of these intentional flaws that make the reader learn about the complex subjects such as succession, and allows each and every reader to build their own viewpoint and opinion.